It is overtime here again on Old Favorite Friday, discussing incredible classic beers. And I was just saying, I have not had this beer in so many years because it was actually discontinued by the brewery, at least in this iteration. Lagunitas Shugga, but by the way, don't be misled. This is Lagunitas Brown Shugga. This is a rendition of that beer that they have brought back after it was taken out of rotation. And this beer represents so much about my early days in craft beer. Lagunitas, for you, those of you who don't know, made in 1993, the brewery was founded. This beer came about in 1997. It was a quote-unquote mistake where they were brewing a barley wine and they did not have enough malt, so they used a bunch of brown sugar and created kind of a phenomenon. For a long time, this was a harder beer to get your hands on. I knew people that would trade for it because it wasn't available in their state. And it was a big deal when you got your hands on a bottle of brown sugar. To the point where when they were not able to actually release this beer one year because of production problems, they had to release a beer called Lagunitas Sucks to respond to the idea that people were so mad at them that this beer was no longer in the rotation. They could not get that beer this year. What this beer is kind of a barley wine. It's a strong ale. You can see by the color here that it's got a deep malt character. They have all these layers of like toffee, caramelized sugar, dark fruit, things of that nature. But kind of in that American barley wine tradition, you've got a really resinous hop character. And sometimes people think that that doesn't go well together, or they worry about how the sweetness and the bitterness will play off each other, especially in a beer that's 9.9%. But they really strike a perfect note here. It balances that sweetness out, never makes it cloying at all, but you get all the flavors from that flavor profile, right? You get the brown sugar, you get the dark fruit, but it never becomes cloying and overly sweet because you have the hops to balance it out. Just every sip of this beer just kind of takes me back. I'm so happy they decided to release this. I don't know if they're going to do it every year. We've seen so much of this with these classic breweries. We're finally getting nostalgic for these beers, and they're bringing them back in their original iteration. So I'm excited. I hope they do. I, for one, will pick up at least a six-pack every year if they decide to continue to make the beer on a regular basis, and I hope you guys will too. I hope you'll get excited like me and see this beer on the shelf and remember all the great times in the early days of the craft beer boom. Food pairings for this, beers like this that are so over the top as far as their flavor profile at 10%, that have this resinous hop character and these fruit flavors, they can be difficult to pair. You know, one thing you could go with would be something like Indian dishes with a lamb, like a curry lamb. I think it would go really, really well, but I'm gonna go really bare bones here. Get yourself a steak, get yourself a porterhouse, get yourself a New York strip, salt, pepper, brown sugar, 1/3 each. Coat the steak, sear it on high on a cast iron skillet, and eat that with this beer. I think you're going to be a very, very happy camper. Thank you guys very much for joining me as always. Please like and subscribe and tell people about these videos if you love craft beer like we do and like to kind of like celebrate the incredible craft beers from, you know, decades ago that still are delivering the goods after all these years. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.